Hello, it's Brad, Laurie, your blockchain Brad. And yes, you've seen us before. This is part 2 about Ureeqa, trying to find those key nuggets of gold in the blockchain, and definitely going to explore what that means when it comes to copyright validation and everything that is not yet built in this platform. And certainly they're in a stage right now technologically where we need to know more. So this conversation in part 2 is all about technology and really explore and unpack the basics of this. And obviously later on, we'll have experts from the dev team come on board from Ureeqa and let us know more. But we have the CEO. And on that note, thank you very much for being here, Harsh. You are the CEO of Ureeqa, and we're really grateful that you could make the time.
Thanks for having me, Brad. It's great to be here.
Likewise, mate. Now, as I said before, this is part 2. Thank you again for that really detailed part 1. That was really fun as well to learn more about that. And in the name of transparency, 2 things. I am not yet invested in this, but I definitely want to be. For more I'm learning about this, and I've done my due diligence. It's not financial advice. And also for those who want to know more, essentially about the TGE, the token itself, the future of this, keep researching. That's what this is all about. And here we have the CEO to help us, and that's the best resource we can possibly get. So tech talk, let's start with copyright again. We did that in part 1 in the context of validation. But when it comes to tech, what I wanted to find out was, how do you build this? How do you build Ureeqa from a technical standpoint, from a developer standpoint, when we talked about that you're already solving a real world problem, but how do you do it from a tech stack? How do you do this from the beginning?
So in terms of tech, obviously we have smart contracts, Solidity, Ethereum, we're building on Ethereum, but a lot of the code base is actually web-based. So we're using things like Node.js and React. We're in the AWS cloud. We're using PostgreSQL backend. And so that basically forms the core infrastructure of what we're building. So we have a lot of people on the front end, middleware, and then the blockchain side that's led by Dr. Shahin,
yes,
PhD grad.
Yeah, I saw him on the website, and I was going to ask you specifically about him. But I also wanted to ask you how big your actual dev team is, and I wanted to ask you also if you're involved directly in the coding because of your engineering background.
So I'm not. I actually, I have a working knowledge of Solidity, but I haven't done any Solidity itself. In my past, I've done a lot of C++, C#, Visual Basic, TSQL, and stuff like that, but haven't personally done. But I understand enough to be dangerous and ask the right questions. Dr. Shahin's handling the Solidity end, and dev team were 5, soon to be 6, and I think we're good there. I really subscribe at this point of development to the Jeff Bezos mentality. If you can't feed your team with the dev team with 2 large pizzas, you're fooling yourself into a false sense of security. At this point,
don't buy Bitcoin, a pizza with Bitcoin. We've learned that.
Yes, I definitely won't be doing that.
Yeah, so let's go back, because that's really exciting to know you've got someone who's very skilled in Solidity. And my apologies for interrupting also to all the listeners, I shouldn't do that. So you've got that expertise, and we've talked at length about why Ethereum, and you've given some very clear examples, but I'd love to hear more on that in the interview, because some would say that it's a little bit bottlenecked or a lot. Especially when we see the likes of NFTs really just coming to the fore now, and Ethereum struggling to cope with that. The fees have gone through the roof. There's so many things that are great about Ethereum, and so many things we need to be, real about as well when we're talking about real business. So why Ethereum to start, beyond the NFT, non-fungible and the fungible as well? Why would you do that technologically and start with Solidity when you yourself have experience in other coding languages where other blockchains are better situated for that in an agnostic way from the outset?
Well, these questions, I hear it. I participated in transactions that were stuck, and I paid way too much gas for certain transactions. I get it. And we have a tendency, like I said in part 1, to view everything through the lens of pure DeFi. So if I were building a product that involved commodity swaps from like one fungible token to another, let's say I'm swapping from Ethereum to USDT or something like that, and I'm on a DEX. I'm on 1inch, Kyber, Uniswap, something like that, right? Obviously, all I care about is getting the price I see on CoinGecko, doing it quickly so the price doesn't change, and paying as little gas as possible. So in that context, I get it. if you look at the problem we're solving, we are actually selling a highly differentiated product. Every creative work is highly differentiated, highly valued by the creator. The timestamp, it takes 3 months right now with US Patent Office. If it takes minutes, it really doesn't matter. The NFT minting, the validation process is going to take days going back and forth with the creator, collecting the information, doing the different tests that are required, using internal tools, external tools, manual processes. So the minting time really doesn't matter. It all comes down to one main criterion, and that is longevity. If I created some work, I want to know that wherever it's protected, that blockchain is going to stand the test of time.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things in business is it's kind of like the art of making the best decisions you can with imperfect information. The space is changing rapidly. There's some new entrants. Ethereum has the issues we all know about. There's new entrants coming in. If I were to bet on what blockchain will be here 20 years from now, with the information I have, I would say Ethereum. Does it mean that Ethereum will be the top computing blockchain platform? I don't know. Maybe something else will overtake it. But I can't bet on which one, and I can't bet the company's future, and I can't bet the creators' records on a blockchain on anything else right now. So that's why we're on Ethereum.
I love that. I love that transparency. And you know what? Technologically, everything stacks up. That's exactly the information I've been getting every time I'm, looking into talking to devs, is that it's about readiness today. And they've proven that so far, being that first smart contract platform, they've evolved the most when it comes to the needs you need, particularly. But let's be real, as you've alluded to, there's other ones coming and there's other ones building and there's other ones right now. We see compatibility and composability merging with the likes of interoperability. We see, most importantly, that functional and core design start to bridge. We know that's happening with those bridges with the EVM. We know that parachains, for example, are really going to change the game for Polkadot. And again, these are not plugs. This is just a reality that these things are going to happen. So will you move in that direction where you'll also allow for more engagement, more development, more, facilitation of that, the utility you want to build in fundamentally by interacting in an agnostic way as the technology and the platforms emerge and evolve to the level of Ethereum, and like you said, even beyond in some instances, so that you're just using the best of blockchain?
We definitely do. I mean, at this point, with the resources we have and solving the problem, figuring out product market fit, honing in on that, then scaling, the bottleneck isn't which blockchain to choose. Ethereum's going to work just fine for us achieving our objectives. If you say on our roadmap is being blockchain agnostic important to us, that is, I see a future in which not one chain rules them all, and that's why I think actually interoperability is important and will continue to be important. So that is something that we see. I mean, for example, Avalanche has Solidity support. If required, we can move. That, that's like an implementation detail that we won't even, that's not really a bottleneck to this business. How do we build a platform that creators will want to come on, will want to protect their work? We do it in a good way. We get some traction on the system. That's where we're focused. The choice of blockchain, where the stamp is and all that. I mean, I've talked about why I believe longevity wise, the best bet right now is Ethereum. That doesn't mean it's going to be the top forever. I'm just longevity wise.
And let's be real also about the practicalities of a CEO. You're going to need to get to that point. Well, if you get to the point, when you get to that point where you're going to have so much interest, around the world for your own use case, you're going to need a very robust engine that can handle that kind of sort of traffic and user traffic. That's just the truth. And if you're just one of many, we're already seeing challenges inherent in the current stage of the blockchain, the current stage of the smart contract platforms, just generally as a comment, then surely, as someone who's a pragmatist first, you're always going to make sure that you address the needs of Ureeqa first, not necessarily be beholden to any particular platform.
That's right. I mean, like we said earlier, we hope to be blockchain agnostic and provide the opportunity to stake your claim and mint the NFT for your work on any blockchain you choose.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So does it surprise you, the tribalism that exists in crypto? I think many are taken aback in your position coming from the mainstream when they see that for some reason, maybe it's the monetary aspect of the token, many people get obsessed with, this tribal nature of protecting their own camp on their own platform.
I think it's a symptom of how early we are in this space. So people latch on to technology, and I think folks who aren't deep into technology actually sometimes think that it's more mystical than it really is. So actually in Ferrum, I did an interview 2 weeks ago, and one of the questions that was submitted that we didn't get to is, for staking your claim, are you guys partnering with any companies? And that is a perception out there that writing the code to stake your claim is so difficult that we might have to partner with someone, because it's almost mystical. People over time will realize, just like web developers, Solidity developers are, it costs this much, you develop, you provide the logic, it gets implemented. As a business person, you have a problem to solve. Okay, we need to put it on the blockchain. Here's the steps we need to do, and a developer does it. It's right. Not to minimize that, they are good developers, they are great developers, you have to be security conscious, but it's more of a commodity than people realize. What isn't is how good the idea is, and the problem it's trying to solve. How big is the market? Is it growing? What's the team like? Can the team actually achieve it? Finances, do they have the funds to get them to cash flow positive? Tokenomics, how do the tokenomics look? What's the utility of these become more important than, oh my God, how many lines of code do you have? And who's in the smart contract?
I know. And basically it all translates to when moon. The partners you mentioned, it's really when moon. So that's why we're talking, in detail now to really remove a lot of that hype talk from the equation, because it gets pretty confusing, it gets pretty stifled, and it's a bit of a mess, to be honest, because everyone wants that price to go up. Now, in your case, you haven't even got the token out yet. And already there's going to be hype from this. I can just tell from the way things are unfolding with just what you are. But bringing it back down to that tech though, we know you're the pragmatist. We know that you're going to, build this out for the long term, and things change in technology, whether it's crypto or not. We've seen even with Google, how quickly things can move, and how not always the best tech will win. It's the best tech plus, everything else they build in around it. So in your case, how can you, be comfortable with the tech that you have, know that you're going to be that first mover? Because I ask you this because I don't want to see you be stifled by any kind of camp-based thinking, and you don't have that. But at the same time, you're cognizant that there could be other technologies that engage and are supported by technology that perhaps makes it easier to interact with. Because we talked about in the last interview, in part one, that it all comes down to the ease of the user. So are you going to have to keep up and really make sure you've got the tech team that's beyond even Solidity, really make sure they're all upskilled in every code that comes forth?
Well, in any of the companies we run, one of the core values is to embrace change. Companies that don't change die. I mean, think Blockbuster, for example.
Yeah.
And we were, in tech, in real estate, now we're in crypto and blockchain. We're evolving as well. And so we'll still have that same mentality. We gave the reasons why we're launching on Ethereum. We are open to other blockchains as well. And we think that over time, we want to be blockchain agnostic. But I think for the purposes and visibility into this year, closed beta and beyond to the end of the year, we think Ethereum will be fine. And by then we'll have more data to determine what the next steps are on the blockchain side, if any.
Got it. And I wanted to ask you from a business sense, even though that's part 3 of our conversation, is it strategic also? Because Ethereum is, from my assessment, really aligning with the West, particularly. I mean, yes, it's global, and yes, it's an international smart contract platform. That's what it does. It's its beauty. But it also has a lot of VC support, with a lot of the startups that come forth on them as applications. And we see a very complex inner web of participants in that world. And they relate also out to the bigger business as well. So being in Toronto, in a respected region of the West, is that strategic? Is it valuable to have that brand?
Well, I mean, that goes along with the longevity question, right? I think Ethereum has the brand right now. It's trusted. The artists want their protection on a trusted brand. And then coincidentally, Vitalik Buterin went to our university. I mean, there's a couple of people from University of Waterloo on the team. We love to support local. And, yeah, there's a variety of reasons why Ethereum makes sense for us, and I think we've gone through them all on this.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be surprised though if there are some entities like, for example, Polkadot. Again, people know that I also really like some of the things happening there technologically. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them are contacting you at some point and saying, hey, how can we interact? How can we bridge? How can we explore potentials? Is that happening yet?
It isn't, but I have spoken to people at Web3 for the Polkadot private sale, for example. And, it will happen. I think Avalanche, for example, with their Solidity support would be another good one. But again, there's so much to do with this that I think that changing our choice of blockchain at this point isn't really high on the priority list.
Yeah, as long as it's functional. I flogged that horse now, and we'll move on. But thank you again for the transparency. It really is clear exactly where your trajectory is with the beginnings and with Ethereum. Now, with the smart contract audits, how have you approached this? Because we've seen so many rug pulls, so many problems with unaudited code. You clearly want to make sure it is from the start, and you've got Tom to make sure the legals are all properly done. What's the process at the moment? Where are you positioned for your audits?
Okay, so Dr. Shahin is coincidentally developing the smart contracts, and he's also a person who has done audits for other people. But we're going to do internal audits first, and we're currently shortlisted 2 or 3 companies, and shortly the first batch of smart contracts are going to go out for audit. So we intend to have them audited prior to TGE.
Okay, so that's coming up within a matter of weeks then, and then there'll be subsequent audits throughout as you build forward.
Definitely, it's part of our process.
Okay, great. Now the validator training program, we talked about that in part 1, but from a tech standpoint, this is really interesting because the validation is literally part of the integrity of technology or the technological design. So do you want to just explain a little bit more of this as best you can from a tech brain, because this really is quite innovative in the way you've made it an incentive. You also strengthen the network this way.
Okay, so the people in our Telegram channel are starting to ask, how do I prepare? How difficult is it going to be? And the validation process is simply, the goal is to answer questions like we talked about: authorship, who created it; ownership, who owns it; and originality. So those are the questions we're trying to. We're going to use multiple ways to do that. Obviously, we're going to have legal agreements for people to e-sign. We're going to request information and proof from them. There's going to be some common steps regardless of the creative work type. And then, for example, let's say smart contracts. You get the Solidity code. Well, you're going to compile it, take the bytecode, and compare it to what's on blockchain, for example. Website. One of the steps, you're going to have to create a custom DNS record and ping the server and make sure the person actually has control of that as well. So there are some common steps. There are some unique steps. We sometimes use external tools like reverse image searches. We sometimes use internal tools, but it's going to be a combination. And this is our first cut at it. And over time, it's going to get better and better. Think cell phones, where there's flip phone, no keyboard, then there's a physical keyboard, then there's a virtual keyboard. And we're going to evolve. This thing's been a dinosaur for a while. We're not going to flick a switch and have the perfect solution day one. And anyone who thinks that is insane, because the copyright process is very complicated. I mean, their original work, there's derivative works, there's multiple owners, there's transfer, there's lights, there's a lot. It's very complicated. So we're gonna narrow the scope, focus on this person created and owns it, grow from there. We're gonna have these validation steps. We're gonna improve it over time. And that's the plan.
Okay, well, how about the UX UI then? If that's the plan, it's going to be easy. You've got to have the interface to make this easy. So I saw some snippets on your website as well that it really showed, a nice clean design, but how do you know unless you're interacting with it? So obviously you're in that beta phase now, the MVP as well. So what can you tell us about the user experience and the feedback you've had so far?
So what I can tell you is the good news is we have a really good UI UX person on it. This person has developed, been product manager at other products, other successful products, and is really good at what he does, and he's owning that. In terms of feedback, it's largely internal at this point, but we will from March 23rd start getting feedback from the closed group. But I can tell you that someone who's pretty critical, I'm happy with how it looks and feels. And I'm really happy with Amadeo, who's working on the UI UX. I trust him. Everyone on the team I brought in, for a reason. I trust them. I know their work. I believe in them.
But my job is to go a little bit beyond that and dig a bit. So, okay, you trust him, but in that sense, how much are you having meetings with him though? How much of you experiencing this along the way as the CEO? Because it's one thing to trust, and clearly you picked a good team. That's just the reality.
Right.
But you still need to make sure that there's updates and this is all being properly tweaked, because I don't want to see a situation where, the UX UI is an issue at launch, of your beta and the MVP. So, or even at the TGE, more importantly. So, do you get that? Are the checks and balances happening within the team? Is he meeting with you regularly to make sure that there's dialogue, or is it something where he just purely does on his own?
No. So I actually meet with him and Matt, who's currently working a lot on the validation process, weekly, and we have ad hoc meetings as well. So like we had a weekly meeting, but then tomorrow we're meeting as well because they have some questions for me. Mm-hmm. So I'm taking a regular pulse along the way. I'm not micromanaging by any means, but I am checking in often enough that it can't get derailed and go off on a 3-week hiatus that we need to bring back on track. That won't happen.
Well, when I look at your team, there isn't that many devs that are advertised on your website, and you've always said you're a lean team, which is smart in the beginning. But as you grow, you're going to need a lot more devs, I would think, to support some of these lead devs you have. So what's the plan there? Have you already started thinking about the different skill sets you need and advertising, hiring plans? Because you're definitely going to make money on this raise. There's no question. This is going to, catch the attention of a lot of people. Yeah.
So, we have 6 on the dev team. So we don't even have them on the website yet, but those people are working on it.
Right.
And then we're located in Kitchener-Waterloo, which is, the Silicon Valley of Canada. I don't know if you know this, but back when I was a student, Bill Gates used to come on campus once a year to meet the top grad of CS. And at that time, Microsoft hired more software developers from the University of Waterloo than any university in the world, more than MIT, more than Stanford. So we have a very good, pool of developers in our local community. In fact, from my office, I could see Google's Canadian headquarters, not their Kitchener headquarters, their Canadian headquarters right there. So we're in the heart of it.
That's awesome. I stayed in the Bay Area when I was studying some of the movements and development of blockchain for a few months. And certainly there was a bit of buzz happening there. But a lot of people were saying to me, even then, places like Vietnam, places like India, places like Berlin were really hot. And obviously, in your region with Toronto and with Waterloo, a lot was developing there. Do you still feel that? Do you feel like you're in one of those buzz regions of the world that are bringing blockchain to the business for?
So I definitely feel that we're in a community that's heavily developer focused. I would say blockchain and crypto is a small sliver right now, but it's going to grow. I would say it's more focused on traditional mobile web type development at this point locally. But the crypto scene is just growing here, just like it is everywhere else.
Is it? So why haven't they captured, the market share? You would think to someone like Bill Gates or Warren Buffett has these very strong opinions of things, but you see what I'm saying is people in the know, whether they're devs or whether they're entrepreneurs, why haven't they capitalized like they could? Because clearly it's not just about the innovation technologically, it's that coupling with crypto. There's a huge potential here financially as well, especially for Ureeqa.
There's still, we know there's still a stigma in the space.
Is there?
And, the lack of, regulatory frameworks for legit teams to come on board and feel comfortable. It's a hindrance. And, even though these regulatory bodies want teams like us in, they make it difficult. The only reason we're taking the step is we believe so strongly in the value we could bring for the creative community that we're actually going out on a limb. But the legal process is exhausting, going through all the hoops and.
But at the same time, honestly, Harsh, it's why we're talking today. I have not seen a team, and we've talked before about this, that has gone through this rigor, this kind of effort and bother to make sure that you literally can be compliant for the long term. So if anyone is wondering, I'm literally saying this through the camera, and you're doing your research and you find that no one's taking any time to look at the legals, skip them right away. Because this team is the exact opposite. So do you want to touch on that? So it's proof from you, not me, that you spend, how much time you spend make and to continue to do, to liaise and discuss and learn and just make sure that you're compliant from the outset with Tom leading that outfit or that part of the team?
Yeah, I mean, so we talked about Tom a lot. There's a guy named Usman Sheikh who is voted top fintech lawyer 2 years in a row. We're working with Usman to proactively go to the OSC, the Canadian version of the SEC, through their Launchpad program to get proactive blessings for what we're doing. So that's going on. And then the entire raise process has to be compliant. We got to do KYC, then an NDA, then deliver the tokenomics. We're also going to deliver a schedule of payment of token by month, which I haven't seen any other project do. Then we have a pre-token seal agreement. The pre-token seal agreement is different depending on where you are in the world. It's all geared to ensure that we keep people safe. They aren't putting an irresponsible amount of money for their situation into this or anything else, and that they are compliant with the laws where they are resident. Right. But it's a lot of time, effort, and money to do this. But it's important because we're in it for the long term.
And, it's interesting because Vitalik really brought your region to the fore with his own, position, his own status, his own technological work with Ethereum, and obviously all the way down to the original coding and working with Gavin and others. But really, you're highlighting the biz value of this as well for the region you're in. And that's going to be something that is of immense value, especially if you can be one of those first movers who show that this can be done. Blockchain can be literally embedded with business from the outset properly. And if this can be done in the West and really set forth true trajectories of utility, I think you could be one of the game changers of the space. I really do. And in that sense, what about the open source nature? You're an advocate, obviously, for the blockchain. You wouldn't use it if you weren't. But how open are you going to be with your code? How open are you going to be, especially given that, we're talking about copyrights here, talking about validation. So how much are you going to protect your own code and your own system?
All right, so I'll start with the whole decentralized, centralized thing. There's a lot of people who believe everything that's decentralized is good, everything that's centralized is bad. And like most things in life, I believe it's a balance. And there are some things like traditional lending, borrowing, DeFi that's perfect for 100% decentralization, run by a DAO. What we're doing actually involves a lot more subjectivity. In fact, it's taken to courts. Courts are subjective by their very nature. So we have a decentralized component with the blockchain interaction. All the smart contracts will be open source. We have a centralized component that we're building to deal with the package of proof because there's a lot of human element. And for now, that will be centralized. Over time, we expect to use more things like AI and automate a lot more of it, maybe put more to the blockchain. Over time, we see the shift moving to more decentralized, less centralized, until one day, hopefully, we can do a completely graceful handoff and it's completely decentralized maybe one day. But right now, open source, all interaction with the blockchain, closed source, everything else, and that'll shift over time.
Fantastic. And, that's also the vision you have to eventually have that automation built in so that one day you don't have to be the CEO necessarily of working in an operating system that is poised for, ideal DeFi, if it ever, emerges beyond the multi-sig. Now, I wanted to ask you in that sense, I was going to ask you in part 3, but it just made me think of it, is do you ever want to sell the company at some point? Is that because you're an entrepreneur as much as you are an engineer and as much as you are, many of the different hats that you wear, do you want to be able to be in a position one day where this is of such immense value as Ureeqa that you can pull back and sell this company, for a substantial amount of money?
My strong preference would be to grow it to the point where it's an internationally recognized global brand, protecting creators' work, extremely cash flow positive, the community enrichment wallets growing like crazy, and the Ureeqa token has so much utility in terms of being able to buy fractional ownership of creative works, to get a VIP entry into exclusive creative events, things like that. And it's, like I said, extremely cash flow positive. Because one day this space will grow up and like everything else investment-wise, cash flows will be the only thing that matter. One day that's going to be the case, even in crypto.
So could Ureeqa technically be listed on the stock market as a security and also have your token? Could it technically have equity value that's separate from your token? Because both those are legal streams of value.
Well, a lot of projects are like, I mean, take Tribalism, for example. They have their utility token, and then I think they recently sold some equity crowdfunding. So there's a lot of projects that have both, and it's very important for people to read the white paper and understand what they're buying when they buy these tokens. So yes, we will have this dual value, the equity and the token, and those are distinct, but we intend to build value for both streams. And we intend for this platform to be very cash flow positive, which hopefully helps both equity holders and token holders.
Yes, and it's interesting because a lot of people, they speculate if they don't quite understand the system, and they might say that the utility really isn't going to be evidenced, as intended. But the reality is you need time. And that's the thing that we've also talked about pre-interview, is that initially you need that launch to create liquidity. You need that launch to affect attention. You need that launch for many different reasons. But you cannot have a real utility token without people. And the more you have reach, the more that this engages, the more real use case, the more this will flourish. So it all works in synergy with, technically and functionally and fundamentally a company that's real and building. So I wish you all the best in both of those aspects, because, you've got the lawyers behind you to make sure that you can be done. But when it goes pull back to that tech point, you're on point, it seems, with everything that you're on target. So have there been any glitches though? Have there been any technological challenges that you didn't know about, you didn't expect, as you've been building this towards the TGE, and obviously the beta phase?
I would say not really. I mean, if I put my investor hat on, I always start looking and say, on one extreme, there's high technical risk, low marketing risk. An example is you develop a cure for cancer. High technical risk, but if you develop it, there's nothing to market, it'll sell itself. And then there's low technical risk, high marketing risk. And I would say that we're closer to this end, because if we get a skilled team of developers with the vision, it can be developed. So I would say in terms of us being able to develop it, no, it hasn't been that, I wouldn't say that we've hit any stumbling blocks. But what is challenging is all these opportunities coming and keeping us focused on the closed beta and not getting derailed and spreading our resources too thin. So that's where I see the challenge more than can we actually develop it. And I think that people in this space sort of think that development is so difficult, and in some cases it is, but and some things are in this high technical risk, low marketing risk, but most people think more things are in that space than there really are.
Well, it's interesting because in 2017, when we saw those smart contracts really come to the fore, with all the tinkering being done years before that, perhaps so, perhaps then, because you couldn't do this kind of thing back then. But now, I think I agree with you, is that now you have those platforms, those technological foundations available to you as a resource. So that's why these things can be done and business can be had. So technologically, it sounds like you're really on point, you're really on target, you're in the roadmap for the plan towards the next step. So technologically, what excites you, for the future? What's one big thing you're excited about that's less about the business, less about, the hype and the FOMO and the potential of Ureeqa, the macro, but just technologically, are there features that are coming?
Okay, so something that we're trying to figure out right now is, based on our discussions with big entities that pay artists, we've found that it's very difficult for big companies like Google, Facebook, to pay the right artist the right amount. In fact, they just throw money at companies and say, you guys figure it out.
Right.
So cracking that nut and doing it elegantly on the blockchain as part of our roadmap, that's very interesting, and that is challenging, interesting, and something that we're still kind of figuring out the most elegant solution to, and that's probably what I'm most excited about.
Wow, so it sounds like a feature. It sounds like a feature that you're working on, so that you can make that sort of intermediary facility possible. And it sounds like also they're kind of lined up, these entities that want to throw money at you.
Well, I mean, you might see an advisor in the future that is very well connected in that space.
Oh, you keep teasing. You got to stop teasing. Okay, well, you know what? That's the end of part 2 right now. Thank you so much for your time. I'm loving these conversations. We're going to do part 3 just after this, so we can have 3 sections so that other people can be informed, take a breath from each of this. There's a lot in Ureeqa. But just on that last point, is there anything you wanted to add in the tech talk conversation, Harsh? Is there anything that I've missed at all that you think is really important to just sort of round off this conversation about the technology that's built into Ureeqa?
No, I think you covered a lot actually, and we did give our thoughts on why we have this balance between DeFi and the centralized components, why we chose Ethereum, the tech team. I mean, you covered a lot, Brad. I mean, one thing I have to say is, you know, you may not have the largest following, but I think a lot of people in crypto actually piggyback on your due diligence because you really go a lot deeper than most people. So thanks for asking the tough questions today, and I look forward to doing part 3.
No worries, mate. Well, you heard it from the boss, from the CEO of Ureeqa, from Harsh himself. We are going to do part 3 very soon, but until then, stay tuned and make sure you do your due diligence, just as I've done. And again, it's a privilege and honor to do this because at the end of the day, you don't listen to me, you listen to the man on the other side of this screen, and that is Harsh. He's a CEO. You listen to every single one of them because they're accountable for a whole lot more people. And that's where the trust is built into trustlessness in this future. So thank you again, Harsh, for your time. And we'll talk again very soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Brad.